Welcome to another episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast, a safe place for real talk and discovering powerful stories, talking about mental health, real business journeys, and hearing inspiring stories. My name's Sanjay and I'm a transformational life coach. And this week, I have another powerful guest to tell her hero story. Welcome, Lucy Victoria Jackson. This was an unexpected conversation for me, as I felt nervous knowing bits of Lucy's story, but when we got into it, it was a really powerful and motivating story. Lucy shares her experiences from a young age battling with bullying in school, developing anxiety and depression for a number of years, and then engaging with an emotionally abusive relationship. The turning point for Lucy and the penny drop was when she discovered yoga. If you want to know the power of yoga, then Lucy's story is one to hear. She has now transformed her whole life around, and my God, this was inspiring. I hope you enjoy. Okay then, and welcome to another episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast. And again, I've got these special guests that keep coming. There's like endless streams of them. This week, I think there was only one time before I introduced the guests, I actually felt a bit nervous. Don't ask me why, but let's just see how we get on. So yeah, I'm really, really super grateful to have Lucy Victoria Jackson. How you doing?
Hi, Sanjay. Thank you so much for having me. I am doing well. I'm a little bit hot, kind of melting. Oh, it's really hot today.
Tell me about it. It's, if you're listening to this, we're recording this when it's 32 degrees in the UK?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so we're all a bit sweltering at the moment, but we're all good. We can't complain, as I said. So yeah, I mean, look, one of the reasons why I reached out to you, Lucy, was you live local to me, which is a rarity. I've got no one local on my podcast so far. So Ascot buddy, and also because I heard you do your podcast, I heard your story, and I had to get you on. My audience, the guys that listen to this podcast, like, they really embrace the stories of, you know, going through some real hardship and some real challenges, but yet still coming out and finding your own way to come back to, you know, the best version of yourself. And I know that's a long journey for everyone, but you know, from what I've heard and what I've spoke to you before, so I'm really, really keen to sort of dig deep and see where we go. So let's take it back, Lucy. For everyone who's listening, give us an insight to what it was for Lucy growing up when you were a child.
So I had a really fortunate childhood, as you say, from the Ascot area.
Yep.
I actually grew up around Windsor the first 10 years of my life, but yeah, moved just down the road up to Ascot when I was 10. And I have a lovely family, great mum and dad, an amazing sister who's just 2.5 years younger than me. So she's like my best buddy, and younger brother as well. And again, we just, you know, we had such a lovely time growing up. We were active, we were always outside, we had some amazing holidays, and yeah, I was just really fortunate. I had a really well supported, really fortunate upbringing, so very lucky.
Would you say you like a tight-knit family, like quite close together?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And we were always encouraged to do things together as a family. So even if that was like going for a walk on a Sunday, or going down to the tennis club together on a Friday night, like it was nice. Really lovely. Or rollerblading, roller discos. That was one of the things we did.
Those days. Yes. I think I wasn't so much a roller, the disco one of it, but I used to go to Slough Ice Rink. I used to roll ice skating. God,
ice skating.
Oh my God. It was so long ago. Yeah, I used to do the ice skating. I used to go to the disco ice skating, and it used to get really dark and the music used to go. I mean, I was 12 years old. I thought I was the coolest person in the world. But
oh yeah,
Same. one of those moments, right? Which we'll never forget. Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, amazing to hear that, you know, you had a really good upbringing. You know, you were a tight-knit family. You used to do stuff. There was no disparity, you know, between you guys. Amazing to hear that. So talk us through sort of your teen years, when you were entering your teen years. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so that is when I think things do get hard for people more generally, you know, hormones changing and
Hmm.
just that transition, I think, from primary school into secondary school is always going to be a tough one, I think, because it's kind of like going from this safe little pond into a
Yeah.
much bigger ocean almost, and being just a tiny fish in that big ocean.
It's like,
And
whoa.
so,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit overwhelming, and you kind of like, you get to year 6 at primary school and you're like, oh, I'm the biggest kid in the school and like everyone's looking up to you, and then all of a sudden you make that transition into year 7,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh god, I'm the little kid again, I'm the awkward one with spots, and like my skirt is so much longer than all the older girls, and like my
Mm.
blazer's too big for me and all of that kind of stuff. So for me it was kind of a little bit earlier than teen, I guess. So
Yeah.
when I made that transition into secondary school, that was when things became a little bit more challenging, because again, I was very fortunate. My parents sent me to private school, so the level of education I've received is really high.
Hmm.
But it meant that I was at an all-girls school, and all-girls environments can be really challenging. I know mixed environments, and I'm
Yeah.
sure all boys environments can be as well, but for me, it was the all-girl environment that was just so challenging, because almost immediately I kind of started to be excluded from friendship groups, and I was always made to feel like a bit of an outsider, at least that's how I felt.
Mm.
And I went to secondary school with my best friend from primary school, but pretty much as soon as we got there, she kind of got absorbed into the cool group, as there always is, and I very
Yeah.
much got left behind. So she was quite manipulated in her own way. She was bullied within that circle, but it was just kind of, yeah, that separation and then the being left out. And yeah, that's when the bullying really began at school, and that's definitely when things took a bit of a nosedive for me. So yeah.
Yeah. So just going back on what you said. So
Mm.
obviously, yeah, it's always a massive transition going from one school and obviously being that person and going to another school, especially having your best friend almost, depart from you for whatever
Mm.
reasons. So talk us through what happened. How were you feeling when that happened, when your best friend sort of kind of left you to your own devices? So that's how you felt when that
Yeah, so
happened.
it's hard to kind of to remember exactly looking back, because it
Yeah.
was a long time
Yeah, of
ago now.
course.
We're
Yeah, yeah,
talking nearly 20 years
yeah.
ago, but
I mean, well
but
done on
the
remembering so far.
yeah, I know, but the feelings that kind of come back are
Mm.
just kind of not feeling good enough, really.
Yeah,
That's the big one, like not feeling worthy, not feeling like, yeah, not good enough, and kind of what's wrong with me. It's almost those questions that start to come up.
yeah,
So, and that in amongst all of the hormone changes, and I went through that, I think, much younger than a lot of my peers, actually. Kind of yeah, I think I definitely started, grow boobs and like came on my period much earlier than a lot of the other girls. So like going through
yeah,
those physical changes as well then just made me think even more like worse of myself, if that makes sense. I
yeah.
haven't put that very well, but yeah, so I
No,
think
no,
it's just the combination.
yeah, no. Absolutely
Mm.
understand where you're coming from. It's almost like that. How old were you when that sort of when where? Well, how old were you now?
11, yeah,
11
11,
years old,
12. So
and and
yeah.
and at that age, you were already saying to yourself these sort of types of questions,
Mm.
like, and almost questioning yourself, and that
Mm-hmm.
self-doubt kicking in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which is
Yeah.
obviously not a nice thing at all. Okay, so talk us through sort of going through secondary school. Like, what happened after then? Did things change for you, or was it the same?
No, so after that initial year or so of the kind of the being left out and the separation, then there started to be some verbal bullying as well. So kind of name
Mm,
calling by one girl in particular, and already kind of being conscious of the way that I looked, and kind of, as all teenagers go through an awkward phase, like I had big braces, and as you
yeah.
say, like my skin was quite bad, and just I mean, looking back, it wasn't that bad when I look at pictures of
No, of
myself, but at
course.
the time
At the
it's like the
time,
biggest, oh my gosh, it's so I was already
yeah,
really self-conscious, and
yeah.
and then, as I say, like the verbal bullying began, and it was making fun of my appearance. So for a few years it was quite bad, but it
Hmm.
it did then kind of turn a corner when I was 15, 16. I think girls do grow up a little bit, and then I think also just the pressure of exams start to come in, and people,
Yeah,
were quite focused on that at my school. So maybe that transition of kind of growing up a little bit, and then and then having that extra focus, I think that then it did get a little bit better. But by that point, it had been 3 years of kind of bullying, and then the verbal bullying as well. And then during that time, when I was 13, I think it started to happen. That was when I began to develop anxiety and depression, and also went down a route of self-harm as well. So it was kind of like going through all those things, and by the time it started to get better in terms of the bullying at school, I was already in that cycle of kind of being anxious and depressed and the self-harming. And so that cycle is something, even though the circumstances around me changed, those, as I say, the cycles and those mental health problems still there. And being, again, at an all girls, it was a Catholic school, the counselling services available weren't, I think, what I needed at that time. So the counsellor was the RE teacher, and I mean, her best lines were to do with sex education was just say no, in her Liverpudlian accent. And then in terms of like the anxiety and depression, I know that was literally the amount of our sex education at school was just say no. And then actually a video showing us a video of a baby being born, to be like, this is why you say no, because if you have sex, you're definitely going to get pregnant, and this is going to happen. So,
oh wow.
Yeah, but that's gone on a slight tangent. But in terms of then the counselling that this lady, I mean, she was trying her best, obviously. She was just a teacher, she wasn't a counsellor. But it was like the
we'll
counselling
let her off then.
we'll let her off. But the counselling on offer at school was just not that great, to be honest. So it just I was just caught then in this cycle, and I wasn't getting the help I needed, and my parents weren't really aware of what was going on, because even though we were close, I think it was just feeling ashamed that was what I was going through, and also not knowing the words to kind of share that with your parents. It's kind of like,
and at that age as well, like, you know, you don't know anything, do you?
No, that's it. It's kind of, you don't know what it is. You don't know what you're going through. So how are you meant to find the words to share with them what you're going through? And also I really had this sense of that, because I was feeling like this, I was letting them down, even though they never did anything to make me feel like that. It was just kind of like, them again, it was this, well, there must be something wrong with me kind of thing. So so that's kind of how those few years went. But
no, I mean, look, this is a really interesting topic, because especially at that age, and I'm almost like really fascinated by that age group and mental health, as one of the reasons why I volunteer for a charity called Yes Futures. I had the CEO on the other day, and she said a similar thing. She was actually bullied at a younger age, sort of similar to when you were bullied. However, she dealt with it slightly differently, I suppose. I don't know. It was obviously everyone deals with things differently, but I've heard lots of scenarios where, you know, you have got into that cycle of, you know, being bullied, and you're starting to really convince yourself that there is something wrong with you, but actually there's not. But you can't get out of that cycle. So what, just out of interest, sort of put that to the side. Now, knowing what you know now, Lucy, what would you say to someone that might be in that position when you were at school?
So
how would you go around that?
What I've really learned about bullies over the years is that it's not about the person that's being bullied, it's actually about the bully themselves. So I think flipping that perspective and actually putting yourself in the shoes of the bullies, like how terrible must they be feeling about themselves to want to inflict that kind of feeling onto somebody else, because essentially that's what it is. So that's the main thing that I've learned, and the main thing that I would share with someone who is being bullied. It's nothing to do with you, and it's actually probably because you've got something that they want. It's probably because you're good at something that they want to be good at, or you're a nicer person than they are, or you know, or you have a more stable family life than they do, and it's like, you know, it can be all manner of reasons. But that would be what I would say to my younger self, I think, if I had the chance to, and anyone else going through the same thing. And I think it's worse for kids nowadays as well, because of all the online stuff as well.
Oh God,
so when I was growing up, so I've just turned 30, so when I was growing up, we did have like Bebo. Do you remember that one, Bebo?
Yes. I do. Oh my
Yeah, we had
God.
Bebo and we had
Yeah.
MySpace, and then
Yeah.
like
Oh, MySpace. Yeah.
yeah, and Facebook was just starting to come
Yeah.
in, but there, you know, and there might have been like the odd abusive text sent, but it was nothing like it is now, because obviously every text, you know, that cost you what, 20p or whatever it was back then. So, you know, so I think I mean, for kids growing up now, it must be so much more challenging, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, first of all, just going back to what you would say to your younger self, 100% bang on, and this is
Mm.
exactly what Sarah said, the CEO at Yes Futures, who obviously does what she does with the charity with the kids. So important. I think when you're the most important thing, probably out of all of this for me, and this is just my opinion, is when you couldn't find the words to speak to your parents about it, how would you get the child or the kid to explain that to the parents? Because ultimately the parents are the ones that are going to be in control of that and help them, be best place to help them. I mean, I don't know. I've never been in that situation, so I don't know, but I don't know what your thoughts are on
Yeah,
it.
I think it's a really tricky one, because you know, it was nothing that my parents did or didn't do, I think, that
Mm.
could have helped me through. I was actually having this chat with my mum the other day, because she said, I wish you'd warned me about your podcast episode. I
Yeah.
felt so awful
Oh,
about, and I said, Mum, please don't. Like, first of all, I wouldn't be who I am today without
true. Yeah.
having been through all of that, you know. But also I said, look, there was nothing, looking back, I don't think she could have really done anything differently. I mean,
Mm.
other than maybe acknowledging that actually anxiety and depression can look quite different in different people.
Hmm.
And so for me, I was still a really high achiever. So I still, you know, I'm the biggest geek you ever met in terms of getting my homework in on time, and like literally, but
Yeah.
actually that was almost a bit how my mental health problem manifested, because I put so much pressure on
Sure.
myself. And if I, you know, and I had this thing, like if I didn't get something in on time, then again I'd have this feeling of worthlessness and kind of, so I think, you know, looking out for different signs, you know, because it can manifest really differently in different
Yeah.
people. And as I say, for me, it was that overachiever, not just in terms of schoolwork, but also I was really into my sport. And I put pressure on myself to be in every single
Mm.
sports team. My main sport was netball, and I really needed to be like on all the A team and the first team encounter. I needed to be at the top to
Yeah.
have any sense of like self-worth. And I don't know where that came from, honestly. I really don't. But so I guess just knowing that mental health issues like anxiety and depression, as I say, they can manifest differently in different people. So just because someone
Hmm.
looks okay on the surface, maybe, you know, just digging a bit deeper into kind of what might be going on underneath.
Yeah.
Because obviously we know all the obvious signs: depression, someone locks himself away in the room, doesn't want to get up, doesn't want to wash, of course, doesn't want to eat. Those kinds of signs are quite clear and quite obvious to see.
Hmm.
And then anxiety, you can have the physical kind of, you
Yeah.
know, responses, again, that are maybe easier to spot, but there are different things that are less so, that
Yeah.
maybe just digging a bit deeper, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, but when we know more about it nowadays, as I say, I'm
100%.
30 now, and going through that kind of 15 plus years ago, we know more about mental health now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There is
Yeah.
a lot, just to add on to that, there is a lot more awareness about mental health. There's a lot more support. You know, even, I mean, one thing to mention, and just going off piece a little bit, Lucy, but I really want to mention this, but mental health, just from what I know, again, this is just my opinion, mental health illnesses can approach you at any point of your life. I
Mm.
know someone who was 62 years old who was absolutely fine, healthy their whole life mentally, then all of a sudden got hit by depression.
Mm.
And it was and at that age, when you go through your whole life, and then all of a sudden it hits you, you know, it's not a great thing. So it's important to look after your mental health. For anyone whoever's listening to this, whatever you do, even if you're mentally stable, like, it's important to look after yourself. And there's so much support out there. Okay, so back to Lucy. When you
Mm.
left school, what are you, 16 years old? So 16, what were you doing then? Were you still in school, and what was going on for you?
Yeah. So 16, I actually made a transition from the school that I was at to a different, again, it was still an all-girls private school education kind of situation, but I wanted to change for my 2 years of A levels, basically, because I had friends at the school that I wanted to go to, and I just had a sense that I would be happier there. And I must say, like, that was one of the best decisions I've made. I've always had this thing where sometimes I just know where I need to go or what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And it was just that feeling, like, it was an extra 20 minutes each way for my parents to take me there, because obviously 16, you still can't drive. You want to have your freedom, you still can't drive. But it was, I must say, it was the best decision I made, because those final 2 years in sixth form at this new school were just so much happier in terms of, like, my friendship group that I had there. We were really solid. We're still really good friends now. And I don't know what the difference was. I know we were all a little bit older, but that school just seemed to have quite a different energy about it. I know that's a really yoga-y word, but
no.
It was kind of,
makes sense.
it was a bit more multicultural. There was lots of different people there. And even though it was still a private school, they just seemed a bit more switched on with kind of how to deal with girls, basically.
Okay. No, amazing,
So,
amazing to hear.
Yeah, and they really supported us rather than just had expectations of us, if that makes sense. They had the expectation, but they supported us to get there rather than just putting pressure on, as it felt a little bit like at the first school. So so I was much more supported there. But as I said, I was already, though, in this cycle of depression and anxiety. And even though I was better there, it was still an issue. And then by the time you get to that age, it kind of manifested itself in a slightly different way. So first of all, I took up smoking when I was 16 to help me with my social anxiety. And I found it was a really good mask to wear in social situations, because I didn't always like being around a lot of people. So it would be like, to one friend, should we go and have a cigarette and have those quiet moments outside and have a good chat. And and also, of course, nicotine relaxes you, makes you feel more at ease. Obviously, that's not something I do now. I quit that a long time ago. It doesn't really go with the yogi lifestyle. But then the other place I kind of I went to was, I suppose, looking for approval from, I'm going to call them boys, because at that age they very much are boys. So kind of thinking that by trying to make them happy, then I would be making myself more happy. So looking for my self-worth in that. But of course, it did not work. Not at all. It did make me worse in quite a few areas. So
just tapping on that, because there's been this still goes on today. There's still different ages as well, not just at that age when you were that age. So what did you expect to get from that situation, like, and what was your thought process going into that, as in, like, what were you trying to achieve?
I really don't know. I think the thing is, with girls in particular, of course with everyone, but with girls in particular, we grow up watching Disney movies, and we're kind of like painted this beautiful, well, it's actually not beautiful, it's really quite dark when you think about it, but this kind of image of love that's like, meet your prince and then everything's going to be great and happy, and it's all going to be rainbows and sunshine, and the birds are going to fly around you forever, happily ever after, kind of thing.
Like this fantasy lifestyle sort of thing.
Exactly. And it's and it's not so much that I was expecting that scenario, but I think you do have some expectation that that's going to, like, if you fall in love with someone and they fall in love with you, then that's going to make you complete. And I think that is a really dangerous image to be painting for young people, because first of all, we shouldn't need someone else to make us feel complete, and actually, if we do look for that, then we're just never gonna be able to be happy, because we have to learn to be complete by ourselves and to make ourselves happy and whole first. But at that age, oh my gosh, like you have no understanding of
Last
that.
thing you're
And
thinking
it's,
about.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. The
yeah.
last thing you're thinking about. And then, I mean, throw into the mix again, still all the hormones, still, you know, 16, 17, 18, it's still a really awkward age. I would never want to go back there. And then all of these social expectations, you know, that's when the big parties start to happen, and all of these things. And it's, it was just, I mean, I've gone off track again there, but it's
No, no.
it's
You're
just
still
a
a sponge, aren't
messy.
you, at that age? Like
Oh
growing
yeah,
up through your whole
definitely.
teens up until even till like 19, 20. Even some
Yeah,
people that are 30 years old are still a sponge. But more so when
yeah.
you're that age until you get older and you start going through life and thinking, wow, okay,
Mm.
maybe I should look at this differently. Yeah, no, I get the thought process behind it. Then, okay, so moving forward into 18, 19, what was
Yeah.
what was your what was your what was your plan? What did you think you were going to do, or did you have any idea what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so my original plan, at 18, I left school. And again, being someone that put a lot of pressure on myself to achieve, I did really well, got 3 A's at A level. I had a place at Bristol University. I think at the time it was to study sociology, because I'd heard that that was one of the easiest degrees.
Wait, were you still
Mhm.
suffering from anxiety and depression in these times, or was it okay? Was it
No,
manageable?
I was,
You were
yeah, I
okay,
was,
and you
yeah,
still managed to get
still.
those results and
Yes,
get
yeah.
into
So that's,
university.
yeah. So that's what I mean. I was very high
Mm,
functioning.
yeah.
That's how it manifested.
That
Yeah.
point in particular is very, very interesting, because that
Mm,
just shows how much of an invisible illness this is. Like,
mm,
even going through life like that and smashing grades and getting into
mm,
universities, you were still
mm-hmm.
suffering at that point.
Yeah, and even when it got worse, which I'll go down into, I got a first in my degree in the end, even though it got worse from there. So this is what I mean. I was very high
I mean,
functioning,
it's amazing, well
and
done. but
yeah,
but at the same time, it's
yeah,
like, whoa,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, but yeah, so I had this plan. I was going to go to Bristol University, but then I decided, even though I'd got into study sociology, I'd actually then taken a step back and thought, actually, I maybe can challenge myself a bit more. And I then wanted to
Mhm.
change to do English literature at Bristol. So that was kind of my plan, to go to do English at Bristol University. But I'd always wanted to take a gap year first.
Mhm.
Couldn't get much more Ascot, could I? Gap year. But that was my idea, and that's really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And my my gap year started with a ski season in France. So I got a job as one of those ski reps, you know, the ones that pick you up
Yeah.
from the airport and kind of take you on the bus run, and then they take you on the pub crawl and that kind of thing. And it was
Hmm.
set to be just the best 5 months of my life, like 18, moving
Yeah.
abroad in a lovely little, you know, little apartment, like at the bottom of the mountain, with two lovely new friends that I'd just made, and they were awesome, those two girls. And it was all looking like, oh, this is going to be the best kind of few months ever, and a great moment in between, kind of, you know, studying for however many years and then going on to study again.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, yeah, up for it and all excited. But then very early on in that season, I met someone who went on to become my boyfriend for 5.5 years, and he is now very much an ex, because it was, I don't know how to word it. First of all, there were signs quite early on, but because of how I felt about myself,
Mhm.
I think, you know, framing it in the context of me feeling worthless, not good
Mhm.
enough, you know, unlovable, really. That's very much what he reinforced within me, because that's what he was feeling within him, I think. Like,
Mhm.
again, looking back, this is all with hindsight, but I think, yeah, he very quickly projected those kind of feelings about
Mhm.
himself onto me, and it became an emotionally abusive relationship for
Mhm.
quite a long time, actually. So as I say, for 5.5 years. So
Mhm.
from 18, from this very exciting time in my life, all of a sudden I was pretty much trapped in this
Mhm.
scenario for, as I say, 5.5 years, because by the end of that ski season, he'd never say I had to do anything, but he would make me feel like I did, if that makes sense. He'd never use certain words, but it would be a manipulation to make me feel a certain way.
Can I just ask you something? Sorry to stop you. I'm interested. How did you actually? What was the setting you met him in?
Good question. We worked for
If
the
you can
same.
remember.
Yeah, we
That was a
worked
while
from the
ago.
same. We worked for the same company. So he
Okay.
was a chalet host for the same company. So naturally,
Okay.
all of the workers of the same company would
You all get
socialize
together.
together. So it would just be
Okay.
socializing all together, really, and it just kind of went on from there.
There's a reason why I asked that question is
Mm,
because if anyone is listening to this, and they might find they are or they could be getting into that sort of relationship, it's important to know sort of how it can come about, and it is as easy as that, right? But I suppose actually
yeah,
carry on, sort of moving forward, like the triggers and stuff.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
carry on. Sorry.
Definitely. Yeah, but he, he was only 18 as well, so we're both
Hmm.
very young and, obviously still figuring out life at that age. But yes, but so by the end of the season, I had written to Bristol and declined my place that I had lined up there. So I'd let go of that big dream that I had there, I guess. And his A-level results were nowhere near as good as mine, so he had a bit of a scramble to get into university, but we still ended up going to quite a good one. He ended up getting a place at Hull University, and basically kind of made me feel like I had to go there as well. So and obviously being a straight A student with this kind of perfect track record on paper,
Yeah.
I had no issues getting
Was it?
in. They
Yeah.
wanted me almost straight. I walked into the got a last minute interview, walked in, and they didn't really
Straight
want to
away.
meet me for very long. They were like, "Yep, please
Of
come."
course. Of
And I got a
course.
student bursary, and so I was kind of like that. And then I was tied in for at least 3 years there, of course, being at the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
university together. And to be honest, like that's where it got worse,
Mm.
because just as these things go on, they do tend to
Just
get
develops, doesn't it?
worse.
Yeah.
And I again, kind of, I was very good at netball, so I got on the first team in my first year. But if you know anything about university sport, you'll know the sport is really not the main thing that the sports teams
Hmm.
do. It's the drinking on a Wednesday night after
Oh yeah.
your
Student nights, isn't
games,
it?
student nights,
Yeah.
that's it. But I played netball for my whole 3 years at uni and never went out on a Wednesday night ever. Never ever, because I was in this situation where I was made to feel like that wasn't what ladies did, kind of thing. Like, you don't,
Yeah.
and any time I did go out at uni, like, he had to be there. And again, he would never say you can't wear this or you can't wear makeup, but the way that he would comment when I did wear a certain dress, say, or wear makeup, would be would make me know that it wasn't okay, kind of thing. So
What
I
do you
was
mind
kind
describing sort of what kind
of
of, like, actually just going back to, like, you said he made you go to Hull. Could you mind describing sort of how is there a kind of conversation, was it, or was it just kind of
No,
words, or
it wasn't a conversation. No, it
okay.
was just over time, just making me feel like that's what I had to do, if that makes sense. And again, it was a long
Okay.
time ago, and obviously going through traumatic experiences, you do block things out a little
Hmm.
bit. But the way that it was kind of it came about was because of these feelings of worthlessness
Yeah.
within me already. He definitely fed off that, and he blamed me for all of his problems, essentially. So anything that would be bad that would happen to him, say he would get really drunk and pass out on a night out or something, it would all be back to because of something that I did, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I would be the one kind of left being like, oh my god, like, I'm such a terrible person. And I was just honestly made to feel like that, this huge amount of guilt. And then when you feel guilt, you then feel responsible for somebody.
Hmm.
And so it was that sense of kind of feeling responsible for him made me feel like I had to make that
Yeah.
decision to go there with him.
Yeah.
So it was, it's very complicated and very
Yeah.
confusing. And looking at something from the outside, honestly, everyone that knew me was like, what are you doing? Like, I think they all
To
thought I was
you?
completely, they kind of would have conversations with me in a really kind way, like, oh, we're not sure that this is a good decision that you're making, like, are you sure about this? And I think, like, I the way that he went about the emotional abuse was quite clever, because people didn't really see it as that from the outside. I think until later on, until a few years down the line, my friends just thought I was really in love and in this really great situation, because I would, like, it sounds quite romantic, right? Throwing your dream away for love kind of thing. But actually it wasn't, that was far from the truth kind of
Yeah.
thing.
This is interesting because, like, just hearing you speak about your journey, right? And when you said that you got 3 A's, you got into Hull, but yet you were masking anxiety and depression. And then hearing you talk about your friends describe your relationship, they were like, oh yeah, no, it's a really lovely relationship. But actually what's going on underneath is completely different.
Completely.
It sounds like they're running in parallel. And yeah, I just find that quite fascinating.
Yeah, and that is I guess the black hole of abusive situations, is that it's not always obvious what's going on.
Yeah.
Because they make you feel like you have to put on this front and you have to tell certain stories and things like that. But I very quickly got quite separated from my friends and even from my family. Like, we did still see my family, and we went on holidays all together, but he was always very critical of my family members, especially my parents. And
Never in front of them though, right?
oh no,
Yeah.
never in front of them, no, always behind their back. So then it just put me in a very difficult and awkward situation, because then you then feel bad, because you're like, well, is that my family? Are they really like that? Again, painting them in a certain way.
Yeah, but made you start to question your thoughts and your actions.
It's honestly like the biggest web of just confusingness, and it's just, I mean, that's not even a proper word, but it's, do you know what I mean? It's
we get
so
what you
confusing
mean,
and so dark and so complicated. But I must say, a lot of his problems, because again, painting this picture of someone like that, you'd think they'd come from quite a difficult background, but no, his parents were lovely. He had a lovely older brother, and they really took me in and were so kind and so caring. But I don't really know what happened to make him feel the way that he felt about himself, because, as I say, came from a really kind of supportive, stable situation at home. But
now?
Not really, no.
But even that in itself just must be really confusing, right?
Yeah. I think there was a history of mental illness within their family, but kind of that makes what I'm about to say a little bit more interesting, because he went down the route of kind of exploring with drugs first of all, but then kind of he did become quite dependent on certain drugs, and to be honest, he was so secretive about a lot of it that I don't know exactly what it all was. But he definitely smoked a lot of weed, and I think that fed into his kind of paranoia, because for some people that is where it goes, and I know for some people weed is actually really great, and it helps with lots of different medicinal problems and things like that. But I do think for certain people it doesn't mix well with them at all. And with him, it really made him very paranoid, which is where the emotional abuse came from, because he then became paranoid about everything, every little thing I was doing. And so I would be questioned, interrogated about everything, every minute detail. So there was the paranoia first of all, but and it just becomes, as I say, a really big web. And I'm not being very articulate anymore, but you know what I mean.
No, absolutely. You're describing it really well, and I, thank you for explaining that. I think it's important for you to, if anyone's listening, to actually hear that, firsthand, that it can feel like a web. It can feel really confusing. You can feel worthless. You can feel manipulated, but not know it. There is certain things which you just don't even realize is happening around you, but it's happening. Right?
It's happening. And I must just say though that I really don't have any bad feelings towards
Mm-hmm.
him now. As I said right at the beginning, it was just all his problems colliding with mine.
Yeah.
And I actually have nothing but empathy for him and what he's been through. I don't actually have a clue where he is or what he's doing in the world now, but you know, I there's actually no bad feelings, because as I said before, if I hadn't have been through what I've been through, then I wouldn't be where I am now. So
everything
you
happens
know,
for a reason.
yeah,
I think
as
that's
cheesy as it is.
that's true though. It's very true. I say it all the time. I don't care. but no, do you know what? As well, like being able to sit here now and say, you know, you've got untold empathy towards him and the situation he was in. You know, that just shows how much you've grown as a person, how strong you are as an individual to go through all of that, especially what you had prior to that anyway, and then still go through that. Okay, so what happened when it ended? How did it end, or how did you escape the situation?
Escape is a good word.
Mm.
It was like the great escape. So, well, this is really where the yoga starts
I've
to
got
come
you a
into
picture of
it.
like Indiana Jones or something now, like putting on the hat and going for the desert and stuff.
I know.
No, go on.
Yeah, but no. So yeah, this is where yoga really comes into it,
Okay.
because I always say that actually without yoga, or without finding yoga, it's very possible that I wouldn't have made it out of that situation at all.
Oh, also
So
remember to paint the picture that you didn't go out, right? This is university. You
I
didn't go
didn't
out.
go
You didn't do
out at
anything.
all.
You were in all
No,
the time.
pretty much in all the time. But that is
Okay.
why I got such a good degree, because the only place I was
Yeah.
allowed to go was into the library. So
Oh, there you go. Every cloud, eh? Every cloud.
every cloud, exactly. Yeah, literally, like,
Yeah.
was at home, on the netball court, or in the library. That's where you'd find me. But
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
actually it was at uni when I first found yoga,
Mhm.
but then it was just kind of on my iPad, like watching it in my living room, like just literally just doing it for the stretching, for the physical benefits. So yeah, so that's where I first found yoga. But then after university, we moved to London together. His mum very kindly let us use her flat as like a base to live out of in London. And it was actually there that I really got into my yoga practice. So quite soon after being in uni, I got a really lovely job at a charity called Street Child United in the city, in Old Street. And yeah, absolutely loved working for them. It was really, that was like a happy memory of that time. It was like, it was lovely to have that, because kind of restored my faith in people a little bit as well. But that's another story, I guess. But
is it just on that? Isn't it funny though, how one thing like that can literally completely shift how you think about people, the world, right?
Yeah,
that's amazing. I think that's amazing. Well done.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I learned a lot from my time there, and I still support them as a charity and love what they do, even having left many years ago. But it was kind of on my way home from there every evening. So the flat was in Holloway. If you know London, it's kind of the layout of where I was kind of based at the time. So the flat was in Holloway. My office was in Old Street. And then the yoga studio was kind of like a short walk from my office, just kind of on the way towards Holloway. And then I'd get my bus home after yoga. But I literally, like, I found this deal on Woucher, which, if you remember it, was like you got cheap deals. And for some reason, I just kept being able to buy the same deal over and over and over again. So it was like 10 yoga classes for £30, which, being just out of uni, having not much money, I was like, great, I can do yoga for £3 a pop. And I wanted to make the most of it. So I was literally going like 3-4 times a week, like, because again, that was all I was allowed to do. Literally go to work, go to yoga, go home. So I was in this space of like really becoming reliant on my yoga practice, not only to feel physically well, but also it was there that I started to really notice the mental benefits of yoga as well. So it's almost like peeling back the layers of an onion, I guess, like going into the middle, like,
no, it's just so true.
In our life, like, we have all these layers of experiences and conditioning that like build up on top of one another. And again, like, to use the analogy of the web, they all become quite interlinked, and we start to think that that is our identity. And when you've been emotionally abused, like, that's someone else's projection of you kind of in that knot of everything together as well. So when I came to the mat, it was like slowly, it was like this knot just started to unravel. Like I was shedding all of these things, like these ideas of who he was telling me I was, and all of these things I'd felt responsible for over the years. And like every time I came to the mat, it was almost like something else fell away. And so it was.
Can I just ask something? I'm very curious.
Mm-hmm.
When you said you were not allowed to do anything else apart from what that routine was, what would happen if you did do something you was not allowed?
Well, by that point, I had quickly learnt that if I did do something that he didn't like, it was basically like an interrogation.
Okay.
So I would be just questioned and questioned and questioned, asked the same questions over and over again. Who did you see? Who was looking at you? Who were you looking at? Why? Like, did your top fall down? Like, who was there? Who are you talking to? Recall the exact conversation. And it wouldn't just be like a one-off interrogation. It would be like, I'd literally be interrogated about the same thing, like over and over and over and over again.
Wow, really?
And that, yeah, and so that becomes absolutely exhausting. So by that point in the relationship, I kind of knew what was worth it and what wasn't, if that makes sense.
I'm exhausted just hearing you say it.
Yeah, it was exhausting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But even things like before we'd even met, so he'd interrogate me about people and situations and boyfriends that I'd have before, like literally like just drill into such like, I need to know every single, which of course is not healthy at all. Like,
no.
Whereas my lovely boyfriend now, again, we've been together actually about 5.5 years, is like, he literally is like, I don't give a shit. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
No, it's all right, it's fine. You swear as much as you want. Honestly, it's no problem.
He's literally like, I don't give a shit. I didn't know you then, so why would I care? Like, he's literally never asked me one question in 5.5 years.
Wow.
So it's
amazing,
kind of, so by the time I was in London and in that kind of that yoga work home triangle, I just learned that it just wasn't worth it. So but anyway, so that's when I found yoga. And then that was about 2 years of just regularly being in that routine, kind of peeling back the layers, as I say. And then finally I managed to get up the courage to do the great escape, essentially. I just come to that point where I felt strong enough within myself. So I just rang my parents and I said, it's time, can you come get me? Like, we're getting everything in the car and we're getting out of it. And the actual kind of point where I told him, it was literally happened within 24 hours. It was very explosive, but I told him at the very last minute because I knew how he would react. And I was quite sensible in doing it that way, because my parents were literally like half an hour away by the time I'd said anything. And luckily, I mean, it was still quite bad. Like, he threw a lot of my stuff out the window and kind of forcibly pushed me out of the apartment and wouldn't let me get any of my stuff. But until my parents actually showed up with the car and they, my dad. It was my dad went.
Big up, Dad.
Literally like got everything, or as much as I could. I'm sure there's stuff that I left, but by that point, stuff just didn't matter. And then I've never looked back, to be honest. So yeah.
I mean, look, in a nutshell, it sounds like yoga's almost saved you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And did yoga save you from mental health as well?
I mean, saving me from my mental health challenges is maybe not the right word. What it's given me is tools to be able to manage them, because I still get flare-ups now. I've been doing yoga now for 10 years at least, and I still do get flare-ups now. It's not so much of the depression, sometimes it does come up, but more of the anxiety now. Haven't self-harmed in a very, very long time, but what yoga did was give me the tools to be able to deal with the anxiety and the depression. So kind of it makes you much more aware of your thought patterns and kind of which certain emotions are related to thought patterns, and also what it's really shown me is that actually it's all okay, because I used
Yeah.
to put all this big pressure on myself. Like, you know, when I was having certain thoughts or going into certain places, it was like, you know, you put more pressure on yourself, and then that keeps you in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in yoga, you learn to become the witness rather than the person that's involved with the thoughts and the emotions. So
Mm-hmm.
almost like taking a little bit of a step back and just going like, okay, thoughts, they're going to come, they're going to go, that they don't define me. Same with emotions, they're going to come, they're going to go, they don't define me. And also taking away the labels of good or bad, because there's no such thing as a good
I
thought or a
love that.
bad thought, or there's no good or bad emotion. Like, especially with emotion,
Mhm.
emotion makes us human, right? So it's so actually grief, we in the West, we have this label of grief as being like a bad emotion, but actually all it means is that you've experienced a huge amount of love, and that's the only reason you're experiencing it. So it's just like the yin and the yang. And so yeah, so that's how it's helped me kind of deal with the mental health side of things, for sure. So yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love that, and thank you for explaining that. You explained that very elegantly. I love that.
It's my job.
No, that's amazing, amazing. I mean, look, so then obviously, yeah, you started the yoga. I know you went traveling for a little while. We haven't got time to, maybe on another podcast we'll talk about that, because I love traveling as well. So I'll maybe get you on for another that. But so you went to do the yoga. You started your yoga business. Over the last 10 years. How has it been? Like, how has it progressed? What's changed for you, and what have you learned?
Yes. So I've only been teaching for 5.5 years now. So practicing for 10, but teaching for 5.5. And yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. I first learned, my first teacher training was in India, as you say. Won't go into that as much now, but it was in India. And of course, having that introduction to teaching yoga in the home of yoga was just such a beautiful start for me. And I think it gave me a really good rooting in what yoga really is, because I do think in the West we have lost a little bit of connection to what it really is. It's kind of become all about the physical practice and all about like who's wearing the best Lululemon leggings and all that kind of stuff.
It's a completely different perception, isn't it, over here? I kind of agree with you on that.
Yeah, whereas right from the beginning I had this sense of like, yoga is something that needs to be shared with as many people as possible, first of all, but in a way that's really truthful, and unclouded by any judgment or anything like that. So that the community that I've created, it is in Ascot, around our area. And it's just a really, I mean, from day one, it's just been a really supportive community. So like in my classes, I get people of all ages, all abilities, and, you know, people from all kinds of walks of life. And people do keep coming back, most of them, because they kind of see that it's not about like what you're able to do or what you're wearing or anything like that. It's just about coming and spending time with yourself, and just like actually giving a bit back to yourself so that you can then go out and share that with other people. So my whole business is based around that ethos. And kind of, you know, setting up any business is really tough, as I'm sure you know. Like, it's really tough. And the early days were really challenging, because I had a pub job alongside trying to get a yoga business off the ground. Like, pub and yoga doesn't really go
opposite
together, right? But actually one of my longest serving kind of private clients, he came from the pub, and he, you know, still goes to the pub now, like quite obviously not right now because we can't, not yet, but but he still goes to the pub, but he loves his yoga, and he's been with me for maybe 4 years now. So anyway, so for the first kind of 10 months, it was pub job, trying to set up this yoga business. But then I was quite fortunate in the timing I got into the industry. Was quite lucky, because now it's this big thing, but even 5.5 years ago it wasn't quite as big, and I was the only younger teacher in the area, so I was bringing something a bit different into this area. So I was quite lucky that my community grew quite quickly, and it's just built on that, you know, year on year. So I've now, you know, I've got my community classes. I run 5 or 6 of those a week. I've got my corporate client, I've got lots of privates that I like to work one-on-one with people, and I also teach at a yoga studio in Maidenhead twice a week. So it's a really nice kind of range of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you said at the beginning, I've now introduced the podcast as well, which at the moment, as you'll know, doesn't make money. It's not part of the money making side of the business, so to speak, but it's all about building this community. And what I'm trying to do is share wellness tools for as many people as possible, really. So that's what it's all about. But so that's kind of
I mean, amazing. I mean, look, how would you, first of all, thank you. I think you've literally explained your life and jam-packed it in an hour. And I it's funny because when I do these podcasts and I have guests like you on, in my head, when you're speaking, I'm like painting this movie of like your life. It's so funny. I said that last week on my last podcast, and I can kind of picture you in this like movie, like going in this car and going to university, being in this relationship, being at school, being bullied. That's how I'm picturing it, and that's what I do. I don't know why it happens, but thank you. It was really, really detailed. It was very interesting to hear it sort of firsthand. And do you know what? How would you summarize up until now your journey of life? Big question, I know. I'm sorry. I just thought I'd ask you. Why not? It's a hard one.
Yeah, it's a really hard one. I guess just that everything happens for a reason, and to trust the process. Because as I said, I've actually always had this sense, this gut instinct of like where I need to go next and what step I need to follow. Even that bad situation that I found myself in, I kind of knew in my mind that it wasn't where I was going to end up, which is what got me through it, if that makes sense. So I always had this feeling in my stomach, yes, it's bad now, but you're not going to end up here. And so I guess just summarizing it is trusting the process and just knowing that everything is going to happen how it's supposed to. And now I'm really lucky. Like, as I said, I have a wonderful relationship with a lovely man. I have my puppy, who I just love.
What puppy have you got?
We've got a cockapoo called Elsie. She's 10 months old, and she's just oh my god, she's gorgeous. First of all, I know everyone probably says that about their dogs or their children or whatever, but she is very cute. She's really
I mean, you're just being biased here, Lucy. No, I'm joking.
No, honestly, I'll send you a picture because she's so cute. And then last year we bought our house, and so it's kind of like as I say, I've just trusted the process, and this is where it's led me to. And it's definitely not the end. There's definitely a lot more that's going to come, but I've now, got a good foundation in place to move forwards. And I think the next step is kind of looking more at using yoga for more social justice purposes. But let's watch this space on that. But that was a really long answer to that question. But
I don't think you can summarize your life in like 30 seconds. It's pretty
really
much impossible,
hard,
isn't it? No. Look, Lucy, Victoria, Jackson, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I'm forever grateful for you telling your story. And if you've got this far and you're still listening, thank you to you too. And I'm pretty sure Lucy will say thank you as well. If people want to get hold of you, what's the best place to reach out?
So I am most active on Instagram, I would say. It's at Lucy Victoria Jackson Yoga. Cool. You can also check out my website, which is lucyvictoriajackson.com. And then my own podcast is on Apple, Spotify, and that's called Root and Rise of Lucy. But you can find all of that on website or Instagram. So, it's an amazing podcast as well. I haven't listened to all of them, but I have listened to a few, and I do really enjoy them. It's very, very soothing and relaxing as well, but yet insightful. Thank you. The ones I have listened to anyway. Okay, cool. I'll put all the links below or around these posts anyway. So if you wanted to get hold of Lucy, you can. On that note, thank you very much, Lucy. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and the summer heat that we've got. Yes, you too. Thank you so much for having me. No problem. Take care. See you later. You too. Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast. This is a safe place for real talk on discovering powerful stories, talking about mental health, real business journeys, and hearing inspiring stories. Please do subscribe if you are listening to this on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, and leave me a comment. And more importantly, share this with anyone who you think may take value from it. New podcasts every Friday at 12 p.m. I look forward to seeing you next week.